I'm a 32-year-old woman, recently dumped by my husband of 7 years. He left me for someone richer. Yeah, I know what you're thinking, such a classic move. But what he didn't know, and what I hadn't realized either, was that his departure was just the beginning of a whole new chapter in my life. And spoiler alert, it wasn't a sad one. It was the kind of day where everything seemed to be moving in slow motion, but also at the speed of light. I was standing in the middle of our once shared living room, my hands trembling around the coffee mug that had suddenly gone cold. My husband, Mark, was standing by the door, his suitcase half-packed, his face a mix of guilt and relief. I could see the words forming on his lips before he said them. He'd been rehearsing them for weeks, I could tell. I'm sorry, but I've met someone who can give me what I need. Someone who's, well, wealthier. It stung. Like a slap across the face, but not just because of what he said. No, it was because of how he said it, as if wealth had suddenly become the deciding factor in a relationship that was supposed to be built on trust, on love. But I wasn't about to let him see me break. Not in front of him. Not ever again. You're making a mistake, Mark, I said, my voice steady, though my heart was racing in my chest. But if this is what you really want, then go. But don't ever come back. And just like that, he was gone. I watched him leave, and for a brief moment, I felt the weight of it all. The years spent building a life together. The late nights, the laughter, the quiet moments. And now, none of it mattered. Because he had found someone who could offer him more money, more luxury, more status. It felt like a punch to the gut, even though I'd known, deep down, that this was coming. The signs were there, after all. But here's the thing no one tells you when your world gets turned upside down, you have a choice. And I wasn't about to let his selfish decision dictate the rest of my life. I wasn't going to fall apart, not when I had the chance to rise from the ashes. That night, as I sat alone in the empty house, I felt this flicker of something inside me. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was something else, something raw, something fierce. I knew I couldn't just wallow in self-pity. No, I needed to do something. I needed to show Mark that leaving me for someone richer wouldn't make him the winner in this story. So, I did what any sane person would do in a moment of crisis. I Googled how to start a business. I had no idea what I was doing. Zero clue. But I had one thing that Mark didn't: drive. I didn't need a trust fund or a rich daddy. I needed grit, and I was about to prove that the only thing that mattered was my ability to hustle. In those early days, I felt like I was stumbling in the dark. I read countless articles, watched tutorial videos, and spent hours on the phone with people who could barely keep it together themselves. But something inside me kept pushing forward. With each rejection, with each failure, I found myself digging deeper. And then, one day, it happened. I found my niche. It wasn't about what I thought I should be doing, it was about what I wanted to do. And for the first time in a long time, I was doing something for me, not for anyone else. I poured my heart into it. My soul, even. Every free minute, every ounce of energy was channeled into building something that was mine. And let me tell you, it wasn't easy. There were days when I wanted to give up, when the weight of everything felt too much. There were days when I doubted myself, wondering if I was just another person who would fail and fade into obscurity. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. Months passed. Slowly, so slowly, the pieces started falling into place. My business was growing. Not just growing, but thriving. And as the money started rolling in, so did the freedom. The freedom I'd been craving all these years. But the best part? I was doing it without Mark. Without his approval, without his help. It was all mine. And in those quiet moments, when I sat in front of my computer, watching the numbers climb, I thought about him. I thought about how he had left me because I wasn't rich enough. I thought about how he had made a huge mistake. And as my business outpaced his salary, as the world around me changed, I couldn't help but smile. Because, in the end, it wasn't money that made me powerful. It was the one thing Mark had never believed in, me. But that was just the beginning of the story. Trust me, what came next? That's when the real game started. I was on top of the world. My business was thriving, my confidence was growing, and everything felt like it was falling into place. It was the kind of success that I'd only dreamed about, the kind I used to fantasize about when Mark and I would talk about what ifs. What if we could travel? What if we could live in a bigger house? What if we could have more than enough money to do whatever we wanted? I never imagined this, that I'd be the one to make it happen. That I'd be the one to be more successful than he'd ever been. But then, things started to get weird. At first, it was subtle. Little things, like a random text from an unknown number that I deleted without a second thought. A few friends of mine mentioning that they'd seen Mark with his new girlfriend in the fanciest places around town, living a life that I hadn't even realized he could afford. I didn't care at first. Really, I didn't. I had bigger things to focus on. Bigger plans. But as the weeks went by, I couldn't ignore the feeling that something was off. I kept hearing rumors from people in the industry, people who worked with Mark's new girlfriend. They were talking about how he was trying to sell his old business ideas to her, trying to get in with her network. It stung a little, not gonna lie. But then, the real punch came when one of my own employees, someone who'd been with me from the start, came to me with a worried look on her face. "Are you sure you want to do business with Mark's new partner?" she asked, looking over her shoulder as if someone might be listening in. I froze. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, clearly torn about what to say. "I heard she's trying to, well, let's just say she's trying to get her hands on some of your ideas. She's been asking around about your business model." At first, I didn't believe it. I mean, sure, the whole cutthroat business thing wasn't new to me, but this felt personal. It wasn't just about competition, it was about betrayal. I'd never expected Mark's new life to collide with mine, not like this. I thought I'd left him in the past, but somehow, he was still creeping into my world. And then came the real slap in the face. One evening, after a long day of meetings, I was scrolling through my social media when I saw a post. It was Mark, holding a glass of champagne with that same smile I used to adore, standing next to his new girlfriend. It wasn't just any post, though. This one was a blatant flex. They were celebrating some new partnership that, to my absolute horror, looked like it was directly connected to my business. My stomach twisted as I realized what was happening. They were copying my ideas. Mark had somehow wormed his way into the world of my hard work, taking everything I'd built and trying to make it his own. And worse? He was dragging this woman along with him, acting like he'd invented everything I had spent the last few months hustling to create. I didn't cry, though. I didn't even get mad, not right away. I just stared at that post, feeling the adrenaline shoot through my veins, feeling like I was about to do something I'd regret. I should have been more careful, more aware of the people around me. But what was I supposed to do? I was so focused on proving everyone wrong, on climbing higher, that I'd let my guard down. I trusted people. And Mark? He'd never been the kind of person who knew how to let things go. He always had to have the last word, the last laugh. But here's the thing about people like Mark. They think they can just take what they want, assume it's theirs for the taking. And that's where he messed up. Because he had no idea what he was really dealing with. Not anymore. I remember pacing around my office that night, not knowing whether to scream or throw something. My mind was racing in a million directions. On one hand, I was angry. furious. I'd worked my ass off for this. On the other, I was thinking of ways to turn this whole thing around. I needed to act fast. And not just fast, I needed to outsmart them. The next day, I called a meeting with my team. We were going to rework everything. The website, the branding, the business model. Every single thing I had that could be copied, I was going to change. And not just change it, I was going to make it better. I wasn't going to let Mark and his new girlfriend use me as their stepping stone. This was my show now. But even as I came up with my strategy, there was one little voice in my head that wouldn't shut up. It was the voice that reminded me of the past, of the person I used to be, the one who had trusted, the one who believed in love, in partnership. And right then, I had to push that voice down. Because I wasn't that person anymore. This wasn't about love anymore. This wasn't about relationships. This was war. And the only way I was going to win was to make sure I was the one who controlled the game. So, I went to work. But as I started mapping out my plans, as I saw the scope of the challenge ahead of me, I realized something that made my blood run cold. Mark was just the beginning. His girlfriend wasn't just some rich woman living in her bubble. She was a player. And now, we were in a race where the stakes were higher than I'd ever imagined. If I didn't outpace them, if I didn't keep one step ahead, they were going to take everything I had built. And that wasn't going to happen. But could I really outsmart them? Could I really beat them at their own game? I wasn't sure. But I was damn well going to try. It wasn't long before I realized I was in the middle of something way bigger than I'd imagined. Every time I thought I had the upper hand, something would happen to shake my confidence. Mark was no longer just some guy I used to be married to. He had morphed into this obstacle. A tangible, annoying reminder of everything I was trying to outrun. The worst part? His presence was everywhere. In my business, in my head, and now, in my competitors' strategies. I remember one of those sleepless nights, pacing my living room, trying to wrap my mind around the depth of this mess. My fingers drummed against the couch armrest as I stared at my laptop, eyeing the analytics on my latest campaign. The numbers were good. Great, even. But that gnawing feeling at the back of my mind didn't go away. I was watching them get closer. I had spent months building my brand, pushing through endless hours of work, teaching myself everything from digital marketing to supply chain logistics. I was pouring every single ounce of my energy into this, and for what? To have someone swoop in and steal it all? Hell no. I wasn't about to let it happen, but how do you fight a battle when you can't even see the other side? Then, one afternoon, the plot thickened. I was at an industry event, a big one. It felt almost too fancy, too out of place for someone like me. I walked into the sleek conference hall, the air thick with ambition, and immediately, I noticed him. Mark. Of course. He was with his new girlfriend, smiling and laughing like nothing had ever happened between us. Like we hadn't spent 7 years building a life together, only for him to toss it aside like a used tissue. It wasn't the sight of him that made my stomach turn, it was the way he was acting like he was the one who'd been wronged. Like he'd somehow won in all this. I had to bite my lip to keep from walking over and telling him exactly what I thought of him, but I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I stood back, watching. I hated it. I hated how easily he'd slipped into this new life, surrounded by people who had no idea who he really was. How he was parading around like a winner while I was the one who had bled, sweat, and toiled for everything I'd built. But something in that moment clicked. I wasn't just going to beat him at his own game. I was going to make him wish he never left. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, a plan began to form. It wasn't about competing anymore. No. It was about dominating the space. My space, I'd built my business with the idea of standing out, of carving my own niche. But now, I had a bigger goal: to completely obliterate the competition. To make Mark and his girlfriend, who was just as guilty in this mess, feel small. I spent the next week obsessing over the details. I started looking at everything they were doing, what Mark's new partner was offering, what they were selling, where they were getting their investments. The more I dug, the more I saw cracks in their facade. They didn't have what I had: the raw drive, the hustle, the real grit. They had money. A lot of it. But money wasn't everything, was it? I was about to show them that. I revamped my entire strategy. Everything. From the branding to the way we marketed our products. I spent hours drafting new campaigns, focusing on emotional storytelling, tapping into things that made my audience connect with me on a personal level. Every ad, every post, every interaction had to feel like a conversation, like I was speaking directly to each person who followed me. I wasn't just selling something, I was building a community. And while I was doing that, I started doing something even sneakier. I had always kept my personal life private, but now, I was using it. I posted just enough about my success, about how I was the one who had started this from scratch. How I'd turned my heartbreak into fuel for the fire. And the more I did that, the more people were rooting for me. My social media grew faster than I could keep up with. People were starting to see me as the underdog. And I loved it. Mark's girlfriend didn't know what hit her. She tried to copy me, of course. That was predictable. She had the funds, the connections, the resources. But she lacked the authenticity that I had. She was trying to make my success her own, but it wasn't working. Not like it did for me. I could tell she was getting frustrated. I started getting reports from my team about her business's slowdowns, about how they were scrambling to stay relevant. But the more I saw her falter, the more I pushed forward. I wasn't about to let her get away with trying to steal my ideas. And I definitely wasn't going to let Mark sit back and act like I didn't matter. I had to do something to knock him off his high horse. Something big. And I was ready to do whatever it took. Then came the opportunity. One evening, as I was finalizing a new partnership deal with a major retailer, I got a call from one of my suppliers. They had some juicy intel about Mark and his girlfriend. They were in talks with the same retailer. The same one I had just secured a deal with. They were trying to undercut my offer, offering a lower price to take my spot. I smiled to myself. This was it. The moment I'd been waiting for. The perfect way to prove that Mark had made the biggest mistake of his life. The game was on. The moment I got the tip about Mark and his girlfriend trying to sabotage my deal, I knew I had to move fast. My heart was racing, and not from fear. This time, it was pure adrenaline. It was go time. I didn't even hesitate. I called my team in the middle of the night, because when you're running a business and trying to make a statement, you don't wait for business hours. You strike when the opportunity presents itself. Cancel all the deals with the other retailer. I told my lead strategist, we're going to double down our partnership with the one Mark's trying to steal from me. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Are you sure? I mean, it's a big risk. Trust me, I said, my voice steady. We're going to show them exactly who they're messing with. I hung up the phone, grabbed my laptop, and began drafting an email to the key contacts at the retailer. This wasn't about business anymore. This was personal. It wasn't just about outdoing Mark, it was about showing him that I was capable of more than he ever gave me credit for. More than he ever saw in me. As I clicked send, a sense of satisfaction washed over me. This was it. My moment to claim what was mine. The next morning, I got a call from the retailer's director. His tone was neutral, but I could tell something was up. We've got your email. And we've got some news. Mark's team came in with a pretty lowball offer yesterday. They're offering a better price, but... I asked, leaning forward. He sighed. But your email hit a nerve. It made us rethink some things. We're leaning toward your proposal. The emotional angle you're working, the authenticity, it's something Mark's team can't match. They're just throwing numbers at us, but you've made this personal. You've made it real. I felt a rush of victory. This was it. I wasn't just competing in a business world, I was outplaying them on my terms. But even as I basked in the moment, I knew this wasn't the end. No, Mark and his girlfriend weren't going to give up that easily. Later that afternoon, I got a call that made my blood run cold. It was from a mutual friend of mine and Mark's, someone I'd known for years, someone I trusted. She sounded frazzled, out of breath. You need to be careful, she warned. Mark's not done with you. He's calling in favors from all his old contacts. They're trying to find dirt on you, anything to discredit your business. They'll do whatever it takes to bring you down. For a second, I felt that panic, like someone had just shoved me into cold water. But then, the fire came back. Of course, he was going to play dirty. That's always been Mark's way. He was never the kind of guy who played fair. But this time, I wasn't backing down. I spent the next few days monitoring my business, everything from social media to any shady back-channel deals. I was watching, listening, waiting. I wasn't going to let anyone tear down what I built. And then it happened. One of my most trusted employees came to me with some shocking news. Someone had leaked a story about me, about my personal life. About my divorce. About Mark and his new girlfriend. It was everywhere. People were talking about it, laughing about it. The headline screamed, "Jilted wife turned business tycoon. How far will she go?" I read it, and for a split second, my heart dropped. I couldn't believe it. How had they gotten so much information? Who had betrayed me? The story wasn't just about my business success, it was a cheap shot at my past. It was a character assassination wrapped up in headlines that tried to spin everything about me as some kind of tragic joke. I felt the anger building. But I didn't let it consume me. I called a meeting with my team. I knew exactly what I had to do. Let's take control of this narrative, I said. I don't care what they say about my past. I don't care what they say about me. We're going to show the world who we really are. We're going to flip this. My lead strategist raised an eyebrow. You mean, turn the story on its head? I nodded. Exactly. We'll put the focus on the business. On what we're doing right now. Not the past. And we're going to do it loud. We're going to own this. So, that's what we did. Within 48 hours, we launched a full-scale media campaign, flooding every platform with success stories about our brand, about the real work we were doing. We told our story on our terms, with no shame. I wasn't going to hide behind the headlines. They wanted dirt, so we'd give them success. By the time Mark and his girlfriend realized what was happening, it was too late. The narrative had shifted. People were no longer focusing on my past, they were focusing on the now. They were looking at my company, my brand, my message. The sales numbers were spiking. My audience had rallied behind me, and the haters? They were being drowned out by all the positive noise. And then came the final twist. I was sitting in my office, catching up on emails, when I got a notification. A new article went live. The headline read, "Business tycoon beats ex-husband at his own game, and here's how she did it." I didn't even need to read the article to know that I had one. It wasn't just about the business. It wasn't just about the success. It was about Mark realizing, too late, that he had underestimated me. And that's when I knew. He was never going to be a threat again. The ball was in my court now. Looking back, it's crazy how everything shifted. I'd spent so long trying to rebuild my life after Mark left me, and for a while, I had no idea where any of it was headed. All I knew was that I had a choice. I could fall apart and let the past dictate my future, or I could pick myself up, dust myself off, and go after what I wanted. And I did. I went after it with everything I had. It wasn't just about the money anymore. Hell, it wasn't even about proving a point to Mark, even though that felt pretty damn good. It was about the fact that I had finally found my power. My purpose. I had created something from scratch, something that had my blood, sweat, and soul in it. And I wasn't about to let anyone, especially not someone who thought I couldn't do it, take that away from me. Mark tried. I won't lie and say I didn't feel the sting when he made those attempts to undermine me. The media blitzes, the shady tactics, the people trying to take my ideas and pass them off as their own. I could have let that break me. Hell, I could have fallen into the trap of believing I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't capable of standing up to him. But I didn't. Because at some point, you realize that the only opinion that matters is your own. And I started realizing something even more important. I wasn't just doing this for myself anymore. I was doing it for anyone who had ever been underestimated. For the women who had been told they couldn't, the people who had been told they weren't enough. My success wasn't just mine, it was a statement. A reminder to anyone who felt small that they could rise. It's wild how life has a way of surprising you. When Mark walked out, I was broken. I won't lie. I spent a lot of time in the dark, questioning my worth, my choices, everything. But then something shifted. Slowly at first, like the beginning of a storm. I realized I wasn't just surviving, I was evolving. I wasn't just rebuilding, I was reinventing myself. I'll never forget the day I stood in my new office, looking out at the skyline. It was the kind of view you only get in the movies, the kind where the city stretches out in front of you like it's yours to conquer. I thought about all the days I'd spent wondering if I could really do it. If I was really cut out for this. And there I was, watching my dreams unfold. Mark? He didn't even cross my mind as often as he used to. Sure, I saw his name pop up now and then, usually in some tabloid or online gossip column, where people were still trying to catch a glimpse of what he and his girlfriend were doing. But honestly, I didn't care anymore. He was a footnote in my story now, not the central character. And that felt freeing. Like I had finally broken free of everything that had held me back. I remember talking to my team one afternoon, just casually checking in to see how things were going. The business was growing faster than I had ever imagined. We were expanding into new markets, reaching new audiences, building partnerships I had once only dreamed about. And then, someone on my team, someone who had been with me from the start, said something that hit me hard. "You know," she said, looking at me with a grin, "you're not just a businesswoman anymore. You're a brand." I couldn't help but laugh. She wasn't wrong. Somewhere along the way, I'd become something I hadn't planned on. I wasn't just the woman who had been left behind, I was the woman who had taken everything life threw at her and built something unstoppable from it. I thought about how, a year ago, I had no idea where this would lead. I had no plan other than to keep my head above water, to make sure I didn't sink into that hole of self-pity. But here I was, standing tall. I had become more than I ever thought I could be. And honestly, that's the part I'm most proud of. It wasn't just the wealth. It wasn't just the success. It was the fact that I had done it on my own terms. Now, when I think about Mark, I realize something. He was just a stepping stone. A necessary part of my journey. Because without him leaving, without that heartbreak, I wouldn't have found this version of myself. It wasn't the way I would have chosen to start this journey, but it was the catalyst I needed. And I'd never go back. Not for anything. I learned that success isn't just about numbers or deals or how many zeros are on your paycheck. It's about owning your story. It's about standing tall when everything seems to be falling apart and proving that no matter what life throws at you, you have the strength to rise. So, no, Mark didn't win. He might have gotten the rich girlfriend, the fancy lifestyle, the fancy car, but I got something better. I got the life I chose for myself. I got the freedom to wake up every morning knowing that everything I built was mine. No one could take that away. And that, my friends, is the real victory.